Okay, our topic today is contesting in Africa with Mike Fulcher, KC7V, and Roger Western, G3SXW. Mike has been licensed since 1972, and he has operated from 34 entities in 21 different CQ zones. He's a member of the First Class CW Operators Club, the FOC, Central Arizona DX Association, the Arizona Outlaws Contest Club, and of course the Voodoo Contest Group. Roger Western, G3SXW, has been licensed since 1964. He is an advisor to the CQ Worldwide Contest Committee, was inducted into the CQ Contest Hall of Fame in 1998, and the CQDX Hall of Fame in 2007. Roger is a member of the Radio Society of Great Britain, the Chiltern DX Club, the GMDX Group, Central Arizona DX Association, and also the First Class CW Operators Club. Guys, we're really thrilled to have you with us today, and the floor is yours. Go ahead, please.
Hey, thank you, Ken. Hi, everybody. This is Mike Fulcher, KC7V, and thanks for taking the time out of your day today to visit with us. We've got a presentation that's going to talk about the Voodoo Contest Group and our adventures in West Africa over the last 16 years or so. And with me today, you know, every group has got to have a guy that's willing to do the 160 at noon and the 10 meters at midnight because his CW skills are, well, you know, need a little bit of work. So we drag Roger along with us every year just to have someone to pound on. Roger Western, G3SXW. Good afternoon, Roger.
That's very kind of you, Mike. Cheeky. Hey, anyway, good evening, everybody. Nice to be with you, and thanks for joining us. Mike is going to do the presentation. I'm just going to be standing by here. Keep interrupting every time he makes silly mistakes. On you go, Mike.
Thank you. All right, thought to get started. The Voodoo Contest Group, and we're going to go through a little bit of detail about the organization, how we run it, and pictures and things of some of the spots as we go on through the presentation. In 1986, my wife Judy and I were looking for a place to vacation and a place where I could operate the CQ Worldwide CW contest as well. So we had rented for a week a house on Water Island outside of St. Thomas. And as we got closer, some W6s led by Daryl N6DX contacted me and said, hey, we got a group going down too. Why don't you join us? So I got up on top of things and called Vince, K5VT, and Tony, N7BG. And the three of us went down and joined with the other sixes and put on KP2N in 1986 and had so much fun because we were first in the world multi-multi. We went back and over to John Ackley Place in 1987 with a bunch of guys, N2AA, K1ZM, whole bunch of group of guys. That was a lot of fun. Again, first in the world, set a world record from a two-point location. So a little lucky because no one had really put any time in from a third three-point QTH. And back again in 1988. That was kind of the beginning of things. In 1989, Roger joined us for the first time. We had some help from a friend here in Phoenix and got a special call at 4U0ITU and put our first operation from Europe. I think that was the first year Wayne, N6NG, and Bob W6RGG joined the group. And then we joined the French in 1990 with F2CW and did a multi-multi from Morocco. That was the first time trip to Africa. And then on to C56N in 1991. Changed gears a little bit in 92 to Zulu, Charlie 4 Zulu. We had some contacts at the British Cyprus base here to help us get on. And I can remember vividly there was about a 150-foot broadcast tower at the top of the hill, and we were able to put a 2-element 40 at the very top of that and an A4 Cushcraft tri-band a little bit lower, about the 150-foot mark. And I can remember the I's and the YU's pounding the S meter all the way at the end on 40 meters. And then in 1993, we moved on to the Caribbean because Roger had never been down there, so we went over to, I think it was ZF1A's place to put on a operation from there. After that, we needed to make a decision what we were going to do, so we were looking for a place where we'd have a chance to win, have fun, and get real serious, and that meant you needed a QTH that everything that you worked was pretty much a three-pointer. And in fact, over the years, if you look at the logs, we probably averaged somewhere around 2.98, 2.99 points per QSO. And that meant to be someplace where you had the U.S., JA, and Europe all on separate continents. So West Africa seemed to have merit for that. We wanted something semi-rare. Typically, we'd be only station QRV from the country. Again, close to the big population centers, and that's how we came about to be in West Africa. What actually happened is another group here in Phoenix, finding out the plans, they were working on the sideband contest, and Millie WY7K and Warren Hill K7WX were gotten hold of, I think it was 9G5TL, and a couple of the guys in Samir in Ghana, and were able to secure licensing for them and 9G5 Alpha for us in 1994, and that was our first trek to West Africa. Our philosophy really over the years has been focus and fun. We wanted to stick to multi-multi. We've done it with as little as 5 people and as a maximum of 10. We try to balance our fun, maximize the contest score. We're still going there to win, but we realize sometimes that even with all the effort, while there's some QTHs better than others, everyone's not perfect. In West Africa on the high bands, 10, 15, and 20, not too many people can beat us in terms of Qs and multipliers. But on 40, 80, and 160, being 10 to 12 degrees, say, within near the equator or north of the equator, a lot of QRN, even in the November time frame with storms, and it makes hearing on the low bands difficult. And you find it the bands like 40 meters open to Europe, US, and JA at the same time. We just call that the zoo. And we also want to try to maximize fun, so 30, maybe 32 hours of operating per operator, because that's what we're there for. We don't want to sit around. We want to run rate. That's the fun part of it. A lot of people ask us over the years how the Voodoo Contest name was born. Voodoo stands for, it's an animism for white magic from Africa. It's not associated really with what you might see in Haiti and some other places. Robbie, we had gone in, and we had used, backtrack a second, we had used Ghana, or Accra, as our base for about the first 8 years of going to West Africa. So typically we'd fly into Ghana, and then we'd get buses or hire a bus travel agency that would haul us and our equipment from country to country along, I guess the best way to describe it is not good roads, full of potholes, in some cases no concrete, no road at all, just dirt. So bumpy would be a valid description of some of the bus rides that we've taken over the years. We had gone into, I think it was into Benin, and as we were entering the country, there's kind of a funny story associated with that. Over the years you never know what it's going to take to get you inside a country. A big smiling guy came out to the bus to look at us when we entered Benin, and he looked at the bus, he looked at the equipment, he looked at us, and there was maybe 6 or 7 of us, white faces sitting on the bus, and he saw a big cooler sitting right at the front door. And he looked at the cooler, looked up and said, "You guys have any beer?" And we said, "Certainly." He said, "Do you have 9 cans of beer?" "We do." "Okay, you give me 9 cans of beer, no problem, you can go." And that was our entry into Benin. And just as we pulled away, there were a group of voodoo priests walking down the road. And we didn't think much of it at the time, but after the contest and on our way back to Ghana, we were talking about maybe having a name for the group, and Robbie just kind of blurted out Voodoo Contest Group, and it was acclaimed instantly by the rest of us, and that's how we got our name, and we started using that from that point forward. So Robbie, and I think he's on here today, GM3YTS is the guy to blame if you don't like us. The reason we've had success over the years is really we try to simplify things. Our capabilities have a straightforward plan and lots of pre-planning. We started out moving country, a new country every year. In 94 was Ghana, 95 was Benin, 96 we went over to Togo, and it got to be more and more difficult. Getting licenses in West Africa is very doable, but it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of time. It takes phone calls. It takes emails, if you can get emails through, or even if you can get your phone to connect. But it just takes constant follow-up, and we're sitting here in Arizona, by 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 miles away, and the guys in London are a lot closer, but still, it's a 6-7 hour flight just to get down there for them. It takes a lot of time and effort to acquire everything, and there's been certain times or certain trips where we actually did not get our license till we arrived. But we knew we'd get it. We were assured. It just takes a lot of time and effort. But over time, we decided to move to a 2-year format where we would operate 2 years at a time in one QTH. And the reasons for that, the first year you're getting to know the place, you're setting up your antennas and trying to maximize your score without causing interference to each station inside the shack. The second year, you go back, you know where everything needs to be. It takes less time. You can make the changes you needed to make from the year before, and you have less, or you actually have more free time to do some things the second year because you can get it done a lot more quickly. So advanced site survey, and for the first, I'd say 6, 7, 8 years, Roger or Fred, who's now A65BD and G4 BWP, would fly down from London, and they would check out hotel sites, get up on hotel roofs. So only one time did we get kicked off out of a hotel because we didn't ask the right guy for permission to get on the roof, and we were up there tramping around, seeing if it would fit. Fortunately, that hotel was not our hotel of choice, but we made good with them, and everybody was happy at the end. You need enough space, you need reliable power, and hopefully a backup generator. Of course, food and beer, got to have something to subsist on for the time there, and preferably air conditioning. Although I can tell you there was a case once where we had 2 shacks side by side because it wasn't one room big enough, and one room did not have an operating air conditioning, and it was very, very hot and uncomfortable. And the hotel agreed to put a new system in. Well, after a couple of days, they came to us and said, well, we can do that, but we don't have the money to pay for it. So they asked us if we could front the money, they would take it off our hotel bill at the end. That seemed like a fair deal, and they did. We got the air conditioning unit installed, and everybody was happy. Because that time of year in November, if you're on the coast, it's hot in the 90s and humid. When you were inland, it was hot and dry like Phoenix, but still, mid-90 temperatures during the day. Where it may be somewhat used to it for the guys from Phoenix, the guys from the UK, it was a lot tougher for them. And also for simplicity's sake, every team member had a role to play, whether you had an inside team, the outside team, or you were on the admin team. Everybody knew what they needed to do. We were all good friends, we got along well, and it just makes for a lot of fun and success over the years. The traits we look for a group of guys for the Voodoo Contest Club, obviously CW contesters, democratic, nobody has to have their particular way, compatible personalities, and those of you who've been out on trips in the past where you didn't know people, sometimes there's conflicting personalities, and it leads to a little bit of less than fun. And we've avoided that over the years, thank goodness, and got along very well. Everybody well-traveled, and we share the costs. There's the costs of getting there, airfare-wise, the cost of the hotel and while you're on the ground. The way we've kind of run it over the years is we kind of had a kitty where every cost, like the shack, is shared. The purchase of food, of water, of snacks to eat, the bus or the hiring of the bus and the drivers and the guides to get us from country to country, and anything that it may cost us at border crossings and stops along the way is shared by the group. And it helps keep costs down, but nobody gets stuck with a large bill at the end of the day. What really helps to be successful when you're going to foreign countries or someplace semi-rare is to have a contact within the country. And we've been very fortunate over the years. In Ghana, we're off Quest 9G1RQ, and Peter in Benin, TY1PS, Hugo XT2HB in Burkina Faso. You guys probably remember Jim Bullington, 5U7JB. Jim, interesting guy. We'll talk just briefly. He, at one time, I think, was the ambassador to Burundi. I don't remember what years that was, but Jim had retired, come back to U.S., still wanted something to do. He went back and became the director of the Peace Corps in Niamey in Niger, and he was a host for 2 years and stored our stuff between the 2 years for us. And Jim had a nice house. We got to visit with him, and he'd come over and watch us operate, so it was great. In Mali, we had Siré. He was an ex-soccer star. His wife worked in the National Palace, Presidential Palace, and he knew pretty much everybody in Mali, and pretty much everybody knew him. So, he would be in the back in customs when we arrived, helping sort things through. We could get through quickly without any difficulty. What a tremendous guy. He made sure we got around, and just a fun guy to be with, a real professional person. In Togo, we ran into Jenny Sayer. She was part of the British consul and also ran the British school in Lomé. And again, another person who stored our gear for a couple of times, 2 different years while we were in Togo, because that's the only place we went back 3 times. In Guinea, Carol, 3XY2D. Carol is, I think, Belgian, but he's lived down in Guinea for 16 or 17 years, has a very successful business there. And as of late, Zvig in 9L1BTB, I think he's Polish, but he's been in Sierra Leone, works for the UN, flies helicopters, and has been great the last 2 years in helping us be successful from 9L. Just to give you an idea and some idea of what it's taken over the years. Initially when we first started going to West Africa, we would use Pelican cases to ship our amplifiers. I would go out to Walmart or something like that and buy a cosmetic case, drill holes in the bottom through a piece of board, and bolt in the alpha transformer and carry that on the plane as hand luggage. Early in the years, we carried 930s over, so you can imagine carrying a 40-pound 930 in one arm and a 40-pound transformer in the other arm. It was not a lot of fun, believe me. But over the years, we upgraded to for a number of years to K2s, and now most of the group has gone towards K3s. We worked with Tom at Force 12 way back when, had monobenders for 10 through 20. Actually a 4-element 10, 3-element 15, and 3-element 20, a Quizcraft 2-element 40, a bunch of different verticals, mostly for 80 meters. And finally, about 4 or 5 years ago, we purchased a Titan X vertical for 160. We had tried a bunch of stuff over the years to be successful in 160. I remember the first year in '94 in Ghana, we hung out an inverted V from the hotel room, and it was not more than 1.5 feet from the side of the hotel, and nobody could hear us. I think we had 95 Qs on 160. The first 3 or 4 years were like that. We finally went to a balloon. It floated a blue helium balloon, and that worked pretty well for a while, but helium in West Africa is expensive, and hauling it around from country to country only lasted a few years. We needed to try something different. We tried some shortened verticals. I remember in '94 or '95, N6DX Aero was wanting a QSO on 160 from Ghana, so we were only there for a couple of days. I pulled out a shortened vertical, put it up. Fortunately, I could hear had a whisper QSO with him, and we were able to get that taken care of, put it back down, and took it on to the next country. Of course, dipoles, receiving antennas. We had 9 tower sections actually made for us in Abidjan in the Ivory Coast, and we've hauled those around for years. And, of course, tons and tons of guy ropes and miscellaneous hardware. Indoors, I think we have 6 or 7 alpha amplifiers in the pile. Rotators, a lot of us have used HD73s because it only requires 6-conductor cable, and plus they're easy to move around. They do require 12 volts or 120 volts, 110 volts American, so we have some step-down transformers in order to run those. Bandpass filters, coaxial stubs, switches, receiving filters. And a few years ago, Ned, AA7A, and myself had gotten into EME. Ned's been in it for forever. And we decided, I'll probably never put a new country in the air, but we can put something on the air that's never been on 2 meters before. So we hauled an amplifier, a transverter, a couple of dual polarity Yagis and phasing lines, and put the first year we put TZ on the air on 2-meter EME, and then we were able to put Guinea 3X on the air from EME, and hopefully either 9L or EL in the future. But that's a lot of fun. It gives us something to do when the contest is over. Of course, laptops, a Wi-Fi router. We went from wired in a serial type setup of of an IT setup in the past to the Wi-Fi. External keyboards, GAT controls, CW interfaces, mice, and of course spares of everything. 8874s, because they're hard to find and get expensive, tools, fuses, just a bunch of stuff to make sure that we're up and running. I don't have a picture of it here, but this is an interesting story. Back in about, I'd guess, 1997 from Togo, we had a couple of mishaps. We didn't realize at the time that we had a floating ground, and I went to hook up the cable to the serial port on my laptop, and I was in for a rude awakening. It went bang in a big way, and nobody was hurt, but I sure jumped and sure fried my PC. Fortunately, we had another laptop with us, so we avoided a real problem. But that same trip, we had Rogers Alpha 78, I think it was, which is supposed to be semi-automatic, we had the transmit relay go out. So Paul K7PN, who was with us for a number of years and helping build our stations, put together 2 spoons from the hotel with duct tape and made it arrange it as a foot switch to throw the relay and the amplifier from transmit to receive. So that was a clever way of staying on the air with an amplifier. When I say stockpile being about 1 ton, that really is true. You know, there's, as I mentioned, the Pelican 1650 cases. We've reverted to ski bags and snowboarding bags for the antennas, rice sacks to carry all the rope, the coax, and miscellaneous things. And of course, there's always, we had to hire a bus with a roof rack because we've got 2 or 3 20-foot poles for antenna supports, and of course 10-foot sections of tower and long ski bags. And of course, there's always things like tips at the border too, to make sure our stockpile gets through. You know, each year, and Roger can speak to this if he needs to, but Roger was very good at doing the admin side of the product or the business for us, because we needed to hire a reliable transportation source to get us from country to country. And those are 1 and sometimes 2-day trips, and those are long days, maybe 12 hours a day by bus. And we'd have a driver, we'd have probably someone from the travel company that would be there strictly to make sure that the paperwork was in order. It wasn't unusual to get stopped 10, 15 times within a 3 or 4 mile radius. You've got police, militia, military, and customs type stops. And every time this big bus comes rolling down the street, guaranteed we'd get stopped. And most of the time it was not, almost all the time, never to hassle us, but to make sure that the driver had the proper paperwork. Sometimes we'd have to show our passports, but most of the time not. Maybe it cost us $1 or $2 for fees at the crossing, but that was about it. But you know, typically you'd come to the, if you're leaving the country, you'd get to customs, and actually you'd go through customs, and then you'd go through a second stop where they would check all your gear, check your passports, and then you drive down the road. In some cases, it might be 100 yards, and in Niger, it was more like about 70 miles. But then you come to the next country where you got to go through the same thing, but inbound. And sometimes you'd be sitting for 4 or 5 hours with nothing to do, while actually the guys who were helping us would run around with everything. We didn't have to do much. We just kind of sit around and wait till everything got done. They'd come back with their passports, and off we go. Now, I can really say that over the years, we've had very few problems. We've had some anxious moments where guys have come on the bus with guns and pointing at stuff, and we always trained our driver or our host to tell them that don't mention radio, just tell them it's a machine or camping gear or something along those lines.
Yeah, Mike.
Yes.
Yeah, just to say, in a lot of those countries, it's French speaking.
And I don't speak any French. You know, thankfully, Roger and Fred are very fluent in French, and they're part of our admin team. However, sometimes it's good to know French and act like you don't, which really helps us in many cases. Or sometimes you can really go at it when Roger needed to, because when I mentioned earlier about how our teams are set up, I was in charge of the outside team, which really was all the antennas and coax and everything that needed to be done outside on the roof, with lots of help from Fred and some of the other guys, Robbie and Lee Finkel and others. And then Roger and now Ned AA7A are in charge of the inside team. Their job is to make sure, the first thing we do is find the engineer for the hotel. We need 60 amps of current to make sure we run all of our amplifiers. The very first year from Ghana, we set up in the hotel room, and we ran cables down the hallway, which didn't last very long because the hotel didn't like that. So we hadn't bothered to check all the breakers, so we had to take that cable out and just use what we had available to us. And it was 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And about 10 seconds later, trying to run a kilowatt on 6 amps, we blew the circuit breaker, and we were off the air before we really ever got started. And fortunately, we were able to get Ralph was an electrician and be able to get a switch on the breaker, and we learned a lesson from that. And then from there forward, we decided we needed 60 amps of current to have to make sure we could do what we needed to do. And it was Roger's job or Fred's job as our French-speaking guys, and almost all the countries, with the exception of Ghana, which is English-speaking, and the Sierra Leone, which is English-speaking, are ex-foreign francophone countries, and French is the national language. So we stick Roger to work on dealing with the hotel, negotiating with anything that needed to be done, and he was our go-to guy, or Mr. Fix-It, G4VJ. What was Andy's called G3AB now. Was also a Mr. Fix-It guy for us a couple of times. These are the guys that were invaluable for us as a team because most of us, like I said, don't speak French, and we just have dumb looks in our eyes when they're talking to us. So Roger and Fred fixed a lot of that for us. A little bit of the operating history to give you an idea. Here's some of the Voodoos throughout the years. You'll recognize a lot of these calls. Mostly G's. It's been, well, 5B4AGN used to be Bob G3ZEM, and 9H1EL, also Brit, and then a bunch of U.S. guys. So Vince, who passed away earlier this year, that's going to be sad. We're going to be using 9L5VT this fall in honor of Vince. K4UEE, K7GE, Jim Larson. You probably remember him from Larson Antennas. Jim really never operated, but he was along for the fun. He brought his son with him many years and would help out in building things. And then you can see the rest of the lists. N7BG is now W4OI. And some of the newer guys, N7MB, Bud, N7CW joined us last year. Jim, KF7E, a bunch of guys from Phoenix. So we've kept it a pretty close-knit group over the years. And there's Bob W6RGG. Of course, we've got to have 6LAN associated, and we get Dick Norton joined us one year. But a bunch of great guys. Everybody got along well, and that's, again, helped our success. This is going to give you an idea. We started out in Accra in 1994. And I said from 1994 through 2001, we pretty much use Accra as our base to fly into, with the exception of 1 year when we flew into Cote d'Ivoire, into Abidjan. So the second year in 94, we went from 95, we went to Cotonou in Benin, and from there in 96 and 97 and 98 to Lomé in Togo. You can see right there, Togo's only maybe 40 miles wide, but we got stopped more times. And the first year we were in Togo was the first, about 1 year after they had a civil war there. So things were always felt tense in Togo. We got stopped a lot. Only one time was it uncomfortable where a guy came on the bus. That was the year he was asking about all our machines. We got someone stopped by one guard one time who was drunk and dropped his rifle. That was a lot of fun, but he was harmless after that. Again, back to Accra in 1999 and 2000. And then we decided it was time to move on. So you see right before the arrow, there's a little place called Bolgatanga in the north of Ghana. It was about a 10, 12-hour drive up there. We stayed at the Hilton. That was about $8 a night for the hotel. But it was interesting place. The meal was about the same too, about $8 for the meal. And I ate a lot of.
It's what we called the Hilton.
That's true. A lot of spaghetti bolognese over the years eating at these restaurants. But we wanted to go to Ouagadougou, and this is 1 year where probably it cost us the most money. I had a very bright guy at the border in a little town called P.O. And we were stopped with our bus, and we had all of our equipment, and there was maybe 5 or 6 of us on the bus at the time. And he looked at this stuff and looked at us, and I think his fee was somewhere around, I don't know, we negotiated it down to $1,000 for customs, for import duties. And we knew it was probably worth more than what he was charging us, but we didn't want to pay it, so we negotiated. And we didn't really have all the cash on us at the time. So if I'm right, Roger, he allowed us to take either a cousin or a brother or somebody of his into Ouagadougou to collect the cash from us when we got to the bank, and then took it back to the border. So we had some trust, but it was an interesting trip. But that got us to Ouagadougou, and we operated from there in XT in 2001 and in 2002. And I started looking at the country. You can see that Niamey in Niger is not that far down the road. Again, it's probably about a 10, 12-hour drive one way by bus, but at least a one-day trip. The first time in 2003, operation from 5U5Z, this is the place where when we exited customs in Burkina Faso, we drove about 60 or 70 miles. And it's getting late and getting dark. The time we actually got to the border crossing and the input of customs, the guy had already gone to bed. We actually had to have somebody go wake the customs guy up so we could get through the country. Typically, they don't recommend driving after dark because we were we were driving on a dirt road that was not a lot of fun. It was probably 60 or 70 miles, no lights, and we said, well, we know we're going in the right direction, and we got there eventually about midnight, but probably not something we should have been doing, but we had no problems. We were there in the Emmy, and Jim Bullington again helped us out with our gear from 2003 and 2004. From there, we moved to Fred and I, G4BWP A65BD. Everybody had to go back to Wagga, and some of the guys were flying out that night. Fred and I were staying, so we took an extra trip of about 700 kilometers round trip to Bobo Dioulasso. Hugo XT2HV had a home there, so we were able to store our gear in his garage. Fred and I rode the bus after coming 12 hours from Miami down to Bobo and back in time to meet the guys before dinner, so we could have dinner with them before they left. After that, the next year we flew in 2005 into Bamako, and we actually had to drive back to Bobo to get our gear. And on the way back, and this is the year that John K7WP came with us. Of course, John's an ex-retired senior vice president of Discount Tire, and of course, the only time we have a flat tire ever in all these bus trips when John's with us, so you know who was in charge of getting it fixed. And he was down there helping the guy get all that work done, so it was great. And I've got a picture of that a little bit later. And so we operated from TZ5A in 2005 and 2006, and that's where Sea Ray was great help for us. So looking at the map, we said, well, we could go to Senegal, but there's still some countries to the south that we hadn't operated from yet. So the first and easiest place to get to was Conakry, and that was a 2-day trip. And someplace down around here, if you can see my mouse, is a little town called Can-Can, and a little bit to the west of that was Raji, do you remember the name of the town that we stayed?
No, but you got to speed up, Mike.
The Carol, who's our host in Conakry, really talked us into hiring 2 guards. This is the first time we've ever done this. They're ex-military guys carrying AK-47s and sidearms. You go through the Ghanaian highlands as you go into Conakry, and there had been problems with ambushes. And so we had 2 buses that year, one for all the equipment and one for us, the operators. And so each guy rode in the bus. And even though we never ran into any problems, when we stayed the night, the guys were on their own, the military guys, so we bought them a hotel room. It cost us all of about $10. Bought them dinner, put them up for the night, and we ran into a gentleman from the U.S. who's been living in Guinea and worked for one of the food programs. He was on his way at the same time we were in that night, same hotel, and was telling us that, yes, indeed, he'd gotten ambushed a few weeks back, and he had a guard in who actually shot the gun off in his car. Everybody scrambled, nobody got hurt, but it scared him and everybody else more than it did any damage. But I'm not saying that story to cause anybody concern. We never had any problems. It was just a way to protect ourselves just in case, but fortunately nothing happened. So anyway, we were 3X5A, just to give you an idea. Carol, 3XY2D, kind of structured the amateur radio licensing with the PTT in Guinea. So 3X was the country, Y was for amateur, and then a number and a suffix. So originally I think we were given 3XY6 Delta. And as you can imagine, none of us were real pleased by that, and we were trying to convince Carol that why we needed the short call and the advantages of it, and gave him some examples. And he came back all excited a few weeks later and said he got us a very short call. It was 3XT1. So we decided that wasn't going to work too well either, because that would just create a lot of question marks with that call sign. And I think the day before we arrived, Carol finally came back and said he was able to get us 3X5A. And so that made us all happy, and that was a great CW call too. That's what we used in 2007 and 2008. So next year was on to Freetown. It looks like it's a very short distance on the map, and if he had a good road, it was probably only a 6-hour trip. But Fred and Roger and Vince went down there to scour and do a reconnaissance for hotels for Sierra Leone. That trip, due to very poor roads, took about 12 hours. Very bumpy, very uncomfortable, and not highly recommended. But and the sad part is, between our last operation in Guinea in 2008 to the first operation in Freetown in 2009, there was a military coup in Conakry. pretty much shut down the country. The embassies were closed, sent personnel home, and of course all our gear was still stuck in Guinea. Typically the way we do this with all of our equipment, we find a place to store it every year through our local source. We typically offer to pay, and do pay, about $1 a day. So we typically pay $350 to $360 for them to hold our gear for the year. And only once, our last year in Bamako, did we find that we had some coax missing, and we had emergency had to ship some stuff down, or one of the guys, G4IRN, John, had to bring some coax with him from London. Fortunately, he was coming a couple days later, so we were able to call him and tell him we were missing stuff, and he accrued some stuff for us to bring it down. But in Guinea, all our stuff, literally, as we speak, is still stuck in Conakry. We've been unable to get it out. We are now making arrangements through Zabig, 901 BTB, who knows a guy, and Carol, who knows a guy that makes the trip between the two countries by road often. And so we're looking at probably $1,500 to $2,000 to get all of our equipment out, but it's worth it per person, because, and that's one of those group shared costs, because we need to get all that stuff back, get all our EME stuff, all our Yagis, all of our amplifiers. Everything is still stuck in Guinea and not doing us much good. We've made a big effort over the years to put a good signal on the air from wherever we've been to at least be respectable. And the guys in 9L5A this last year had a tremendous QTH, and you'll see a picture of that here in a bit, but 100 watts. Well, we had one or two amplifiers, but we weren't multi-multi like we've been in the past. So anyway, on to Sierra Leone. And here's an idea over the years of some of the results. 16 straight years in the top scores box. We were fortunate the first 4 years are out, we won. That's because the competition wasn't as heavy. Then we ran into the buzzsaw called CN8WW and doing 70 million, which is just fantastic. But we didn't have a QTH that could compete with that, especially in the low bands. And we had made a big effort in 1998. We had 10 operators. We brought extra towers, extra stuff along. It took us a lot of extra time getting everything set up, and we got skunked. And we decided from then on that we would still focus on the win, but we wanted to have more fun. That was the only year out of all of them that wasn't as much fun in the past, because we were trying to set a world record. So we settled for, let's have fun, let's do the best we can, and where our score ends is where it ends. But we were fortunate. We did win again in 2004 and in 2007, and a lot of second places and third places. And guys like the guys from HC8N are just tough competitors, and it's hard to beat those guys from that QTH. But overall, we've been real pleased with the results, and put a lot of QSOs in the log. This just gives you a quick map. You can see from the part of the world. When we first started out in Ghana, those really, even on the west coast of Africa, the ocean is to the south of us. And so the ocean path to the U.S. and Europe didn't exist, but we were allowed in PY in the low bands. And as you can see, we moved around as we got up north of the equator and inland in the deserts, and then in Conakry. Again, the water path became more advantageous towards the U.S. and towards Europe. And it makes a difference in the score. So why do we do it? Well, one, have a lot of fun. This was the rooftop location in 3X, I believe. You can see our Yagi stuck in with all the hotel stuff on top. It involves ham radio. Here's a picture of some of the Ghanaian forest, highlands. I believe this is a protected forested site. I forget, Roger, what that's called, but do you recall?
Well, National Park.
National Park, yeah. Beautiful drive. You can see why we had guards, because there's a lot of switchbacks. You can't go very fast. This was the team from Guinea. On the left, you see K4UEE, and then Roger, and then G4IRN. Fred, G4BWP, who's licensed as A65BD. Here's our guy with named us, Robbie GM3YTS, myself, and Ned AA7A. So you have fun with friends. Get to do something a little bit different. This is where Ned and I were, after the contest, we took down all the Yagis. We put up our 2-meter stuff and did 2-meter EME. We stayed an extra 4 nights and stayed up all night, because that's when the moon was up, and had just a blast. We didn't work like guys, probably around 130, 140, but brand new country for everybody in 2 meters, and so we enjoyed it. Here's a shot from 9L5A. That's Zabig in the picture down here on the right side. He's been a tremendous help. You got Fred again, Nick, Ned, Bud, and Gary's L2IFB. And this was the latest operation. And here's a Google Earth shot And here's the hotel, the Bintamani, and this is the takeoff from the hotel, with the U.S. being out sort of this direction here and Europe this direction here. And this hilltop sits up about 800 feet above the ocean. So even with low power, you can see we could do fantastically well from this QTH. This is the takeoff to the U.S. from that site, from 9L5A. Not too shabby. A lot of guys have commented over the years that, well, let me back up just a second. This is the antennas from 9L5A. Some Moxons and spider beams, 2-element Delta loop last year. This was all make do at the last minute because we didn't have our stuff out of Guinea, so we had to take extra stuff along just to get going. K3, laptop, keyboard, and an alpha. We only had 2 alphas last year, so it wasn't as strong for us. Here's the QTH from 3X5A. Again, you can see beautiful location. This is at high tide. This is the Titan-X 160 vertical next to the water. At high tide, can't be more than 20 feet from the edge of the water. And a lot of guys said our signal at 160 was outstanding. Well, you can see why. Having the Titan-X made a difference starting in 2005 from Mali. We were able to put a lot of guys, especially West Coast guys, in the log on 160, and a lot more JAs too than we've done in the past, because we made an effort to have good receiving antennas, either beverage on the ground in Mali that worked fantastically well. We had flags that Ned had built here in Guinea, but in a lot of cases we could hear just as well in the transmit antenna with a QTH like this. This is the trip from TZ to 3X. You can see we had 2 buses, all the operators in the back one followed, and that was all our equipment in the bus in front of us. Of course, you got to have cash, and our objective every year is to find a street guy that could cash money for us. Well, the Ghanaian franc is about 5,000. That's about the largest bill you could find. It's about 5,000 Guinea franc to $1 US. At the end of the 2-week stay, I personally like to pay my bill with cash. You might as well put the money in a briefcase, because that's about how much bills I had in order to pay a large hotel bill. It just adds up. So remember, to cash more, it's about $100 at a time. Here's our operator. There's Fred, our 15-meter operator, and these guys are our 9mm operators. You can see they got sidearms, AK-47s over the shoulder. They were each guy. They met us in a little town called Can-Can. The bus driver about had a heart attack because he saw these 2 guys pulling him over, and they're serious dudes. And this guy right here shaking Fred's hand comes up and pulls out a Carroll's QSL card out of his pocket. So we knew we had the right guys then. That was pretty interesting. Again, this is the Hotel Cayman. We stayed in Conakry. Beautiful location. Here's the rooftop. Again, we C3 as our main antenna for multipliers. A 3-element Force 12, 2-element Cruisecraft on 40, 3-element on 15, and off to the right, which you can't see, is a 4-element 10. You had to be careful not to get too close to the roof because it's not protected and fall over. Tourism, this is shops right across the street, so if you wanted to take something home, very colorful, plenty of opportunities to buy. A mosque in central Conakry from our hotel. Let's just take some brief shots of some of the other places. In Mali, TZ5A, we had 10 of us in 2005. This is a flat tire that John K7WP got to help fix. When we stopped, Ned, AA7A, is not exactly a small guy. He's about 6'2", 6'3", 200 plus pounds. And all these kids saw him. We broke down right across from a school. And Ned's got red hair and a big Kahuna t-shirt on, and these kids are just drawn to him. So he got to take some good pictures while John and I are in the background there fixing, tying everything down. What happened is I heard something on the side of the bus I was riding, and I thought something had fallen off the top. And it turned out just to be a flat tire. So school was out. They gave them all a break. Here's the hotel, the Olymp in Mali in Bamako. You can see it was about a 6-story hotel. Again, rooftop. You can see all the antennas marked. The beverage out here in the field had to put down every morning and take down, every morning, put up every night, because it was goats and dogs and people. But it was just a bog, a beverage on the ground. It ran about 650 feet, and it worked tremendously well. So we were fortunate there. One of the years we did 6 meters. We tried 6 meters this year with no success, but I think from XT we made 1,300 Qs one year on 6-meter to Europe, but never had an opening to the U.S., so that was kind of disappointing. Again, the Hotel Olymp, this was the 2 restaurants, a small dining room here. Real quick story, we had every year, most years when we're out of the country, it's a Thanksgiving holiday for U.S., and years ago, Roger in a grocery store was trying to talk to one of the grocery managers about turkey. And Roger didn't know the French word, and the guy couldn't figure it out. And Roger was trying to emulate turkey sound and gobbling in a grocery store. It was one of the funniest things I think I've ever seen. And he never got his point across.
With the arm movements as well.
The whole thing. But John happened to mention, somebody mentioned to one of the host guests that, could they make a meal for us of some type that resembled turkey? And the guy says, oh, no problem. He says, I got a turkey farm just down the road. So we actually had an American holiday with 2 turkeys. They weren't what you'd be used to in the U.S., not quite as plump and fat, but still tasty. And, of course, we got ways of protecting our guys willing to risk themselves. Here's Wayne. The hotel, big drop-off, and we use a lot of these rebars out as guy anchor points for ropes. And, there when you're on the rooftop, you use whatever's available, even to the point where we had to make stuff up over the years. Well, there's Wayne, and he's anchored by even bigger, you can't see it, but the rope's tied around Vince on the other side to hold up just in case he went slipping. This is a look down the River Niger from Bamako. The River Niger scoots around and goes to Niamey as well. We had probably the most awesome trip we've ever had in Africa. We went to a little town called, a village called Kangaba, and our host from the PTT was helping get our licenses. The school out there was where he went to school, and he wanted us to visit. It was about 50 miles towards the Ghanaian border down this dirt road. And you can see some of the villages. They're typical thatch roof, mud huts, shared well. There's a full class in school. We visited school this day, and this is a kind of an elementary school, probably even maybe low high school years in West Africa. We brought pens and pencils and things to help. In return, they gave us charcoal masks. They cooked a meal for us. I don't have an audio clip because it won't show up very well. These guys were dancing. These are the village elders sitting here to the left. In this part of West Africa, they have what's called a griot. And this is handed down from firstborn to firstborn. This job is like an MC. The elders would talk to the griot. He would in turn talk to us. And the same way, if we had something we wanted to say to the elders of the village, we would talk to the griot, and then he would talk to the elders. But he did it in such a fashion, very dramatic. At times you thought he was yelling and screaming, but it's just their method. And it was fascinating to watch. And so we had a tremendous meal, a lot of fun. We exchanged gifts. And got to see some things in Africa that you just typically won't see on the beaten path for tourists. Here's just a side of a little side stand. A lot of these in Mali or really any part of West Africa is a typical side street. Once you get off the main drag, it's mostly dirt, a lot of it. And this is how the population lives. It's mostly third world, but almost everybody has a smile on their face, willing to help you as much as possible. Young lady cooking a meal. Here's a shot from the hotel in West Africa from Niamey, looking down the Niger River right towards the United States. 5U5 Zulu was our call in 2003-2004. There you can see Niamey just across the Burkina Faso border. And these are just a couple shots on the trip. Again, a typical village. Once you're outside the city, it's sparse. No electricity, not much running water. Everything is done by wells. Here's a Niger taxi. This looks like on the top, it's really hard to see, but we saw many times where goats or donkeys were tied down on top for the trip. This is the Grand Hotel in Niamey that we stayed and utilized. It had a lot of bungalows. There's myself. Of course, we learned later on it was better to set the rotator the direction you wanted to before you put the tower up and set the antenna up so when it went up and you pushed it up, it was in the direction it didn't require a climb. But it took me a few years to learn that, so here I am going up to turn the antenna in the right direction. Again, we use these bungalows to support the Aggies. Terrific takeoff to the United States. Death trap, yeah. We, even one year where Vince K5V tied into the three-phase power in the TY1PS's house. But typically, you use whatever's available to get the current. So I leave it to the guys that are electricians and engineers to do this kind of work. It's not for me. I'll build antennas. XT2X in 2001 and 2002. Great place. I really liked it. Ouagadougou. It was very laid back. Vince, God rest him, saved a young lady almost drowned in the pool there one year. This was the Splendide, the first hotel we used. And you can see our verticals and antennas on the roof. We learned also, too, that it never pays really to put a Yagi on top of the lift or the elevator, because every time I go off, the noise went from about an S5 to about 20 over 30 over S9. And so hopefully they didn't use it much at night. And if it didn't work at all, well, yeah, I can't figure out how that might have happened. Downtown vendors in Burkina Faso. Typically, a lot of these moped-type bikes is the main source of transportation. You can imagine they're unfiltered. The smog is not very nice. Hard to breathe. If you have asthmatic problems, you might not have a lot of fun. Yep, here's our Elecraft West African agent. Could fix anything we need to have fixed. Dr. Radio. Of course, K4UE put out a couple of DVDs on our trips. I don't know if you've ever seen them. They're pretty good. Bob does a tremendous job in those. And Roger's written a couple of books, too, one particularly on contesting Africa. It's a good read. I'm prone to say that, of course. Future plans, 9L again in 2010. We're hopeful of Liberia in 2011 and 2012, maybe back to Cote d'Ivoire in 2013 and 2014, because we went to Abidjan and a couple places on the west coast there, but never did CQ Worldwide from there. Beyond that, I know we're all getting old and gray, so hopefully we last that long. I know that War at N0AX made fun of us, the sons of the Voodoo Dudes, a long time ago, but I don't know if we have any. So it's time, as they say, to load the bus and move on. So here's our transportation source for the future coming up. Oh, this is pretty good. You see a lot of these signs in West Africa. Our public bar is presently not open because it is closed. You get the meaning. And, of course, the Voodoo rookies had us sit on top of the buses when they go from country to country. Only the experienced guys get to ride inside. Well, that's it. There's a lot of things I didn't cover, but for lack of time, I don't want to go any farther. It's been a tremendous amount of fun, I can say, over the years. A lot of stories. It would take too much time to tell them all. But for the most part, we felt very safe. We've never had any major hassles or major problems from the population. The fact that we're Americans and there's a lot of Muslims has never been an issue. We typically hire 3 or 4 guys to help us haul stuff up to the roof, build antennas, and we pay them more than they would ever get paid otherwise, but less than being crazy. And so we've had a lot of help, a lot of fun, and we just continue to do it because it's just a tremendous time. So thank you for taking the time. I know Ken's going to open us up for questions, and I'll stand by if anybody has any.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Roger. Good stuff. Yeah, go ahead and fire away with your questions. We'll try to get a few in here. Again, your options are either with the questions box, type it in, hit send, or if you have a microphone connected and you'd like to speak directly to the guys and ask your question, we can do that as well. Just go to your little rectangular grab tab and click on the hand icon, and we'll go ahead and pick you up. One of the actually I'll pass this on to Mike and Roger. I know we have an attendee from Senegal with us today, and says if you ever wish to go to 6 Whiskey or 5 Tango, he'd be glad to help you. So I think he's on the attendee list I gave you, and I believe the email address is there. So if you need a contact for either one of those places, he's offering his services.
Bonsoir et merci.
There you go.
Oui.
Okay. Paul asks, can you discuss how you take your Pelican cases and ski bags on the airlines and bring them to Africa? Any issues with the airlines?
Sure. In the past, and this is probably before 9/11 of 2001, you can still check a Pelican case now, as long as the weight's below 50 pounds, and it has always been, because we don't ship them with the transformers inside. Usually take the transformer and the tubes out. The 1650 case is not oversized, it's not overweight, and it just takes as luggage very easily. That has never been a problem. The problem has been if you ship stuff in boxes, big things in boxes. They really get nervous when something's in a cardboard box. So using Pelican cases, no problem. Ski bags, generally not really a problem either, and checked by the airlines. And when we get in customs, we just tell them it's for camping or camping supplies. And that's never been an issue either.
We don't do a lot of snow skiing in West Africa.
fishing poles, that's the other thing. Good excuse. Okay, Steve, K9ZW. Nice call, by the way, Steve. How do you establish your annual budget and allocate to the team members?
Well, everybody knows their budget because in terms of the airfare, everybody's responsible for getting there. So if you take that out of the equation, the annual budget, we have one guy, and that moves from year to year, who's the treasurer of the group. We know ahead of time, we've negotiated ahead of time what our hotel rate's going to be. So we have an idea how much the shack and how much the hotel is going to cost us for the trip. And we have an idea, probably just from experience, what food and water is going to cost us too, a general idea. The things that are unknown are if there's any fees that come up when we get there, anything like customs, border crossings, things of that nature. So we allocate an extra percentage, maybe $200, $300 a person that's put in the budget just in case something comes up. The costs that are shared, again, are the cost of the shack, because we have a separate shack that nobody sleeps in as a general rule, or unless it's got a room off to the side. And that cost is shared by all the team members. But again, we know that generally ahead of time, so we're able to spread the costs out, and everybody knows going in. And I can tell you, typically, if you paid for everything, airfare and everything, you're probably looking at someplace in the $4,000 range, average cost per person, per operator, time was all said and done. Does that seem about right, Roger?
Well, that's more for you guys because you've got to fly all the way from Arizona.
True.
But it varies year to year a lot because, of course, every other year we need to hire a bus and driver and all sorts of stuff to move the stuff country to country, and that adds a big chunk of money onto the normal bill. I was going to say rather less than 4,000, but anyway, I always treat it as my big holiday of the year. So it's worth spending a little cash on.
Yeah, same here. Okay.
Okay. 1 second. Let's go ahead and try to take a live question from Bob, W6RGG. Bob, you with us?
Yes, sir.
All right, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, having been there, this was really great. Mike and Roger did an excellent job, and I enjoyed it immensely. And it was just, I'm really happy you guys put this on, and I appreciate it very much. Good job, Mike.
Mr. Valio, we were in Wyoming together last weekend. My goodness, I can't get rid of you.
Yeah, it's disgusting, isn't it?
Yeah, Roger's been crossing a few time zones here lately. He was out in W7 last week, and now he's back home. Okay, Bob, thanks for your comments, and thanks for joining us. I believe we have one other person. Let me see here if I can pick him up. Oh, okay. Jim, KF7E. Jim, go ahead.
Oh, you already answered my question.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Well, I answered you privately. Go ahead and ask.
I just wondered who gets to be the 9mm operator this year. It's the guy that turned in the lowest score last year.
Yeah, it's a guy with the most busted calls.
Most busted calls. That's great.
Jim is another.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Well, Jim and KF7E and Bob are both ex-Voodoos and been on trips with us, and great guys to be with.
Okay.
I still got the rookie hat. I'll send you. I'll give it to you when I see you.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us, Jim. All right, let's go. Another question here from Tom, and I'm sorry I don't have a call associated with it. Tom, go ahead. You with us, Tom? Okay, I guess not. Let's see. How about Rob, G3TKF? Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the interesting lecture and talk. I'm just intrigued, actually. I'm part of the Bristol Contest Group, G6YB, and we do a lot of travelling around. And how do you manage to get permission to put antennas on hotels and things? That's incredible. Is that down to Roger?
Yeah, can I answer that one, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think probably slightly different in West Africa compared to Europe. I take your point entirely. I've had problems in some European locations. Gibraltar comes to mind. They really didn't want any antennas at all. But down there in West Africa, I think they're just only too happy to have the business. I mean, we're a fairly substantial group. We're going to stay a week or two. It's quite a big income for them. Plus, on top of that, Mike mentioned earlier about how pretty much everybody that you meet in West Africa is so incredibly friendly. You know, they just really put themselves out to please you, and they're always smiling and laughing. It's great. So we've almost never had any problem at all. There was one time in Bamako, the first year in Bamako, where they insisted that we pay a hire charge for, I think it was $400 to hire their roof, which you know, really got up my nose, because that just didn't. There was a reason, because there was a big political conference in town, and there were a lot of French military protecting the French president staying in our hotel, and they had obviously been made to pay an awful lot of money, so we had to pay as well. But apart from that, we've literally had no problems whatsoever. They really put themselves out. There was one year where they took out one of the windows in the shack and replaced it with a big chunk of board and cut a hole through it so we could bring our coaxes in. They really put themselves out.
It's nice to know that people in the world are still helpful towards the hobby.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in every other respect, we've only ever come across, you know, unpleasant, unfriendly people in West Africa, but, you know, barely once. It's a lovely part of the world to visit.
Okay, Rob. Yep. Thanks for joining us. Okay, a couple more questions here we'll grab. Ray, November Mike 2 Oscar. Hi, Ray. Says your operations are all from zones 33 and 35. Any thoughts about zone 36?
Well, that's an awful long way away, and we've got our 1 ton of equipment to ship. 36 is not really reachable by bus, which has been our normal way. So I think we're going to, well, Mike suggested we'll probably move to EL for next year, and then possibly down to TU, so it's still along that piece of the coast. In a way, we've been hoisted by our own petard, to use an expression. You know, we built up such a big stockpile of equipment that it's almost impossible to move it, certainly by plane, any other way than just on a bus. So I think we're going to stay in that general area. And besides, we're comfortable with that area. We've got a lot of experience down that way nowadays. Mike?
Oh, well said. I have nothing to add to that.
Okay, I'll give you my EL2 CD license. You guys can renew it for me when you go there. Okay, question. I'm sorry I don't have a call associated with this, but wondering if you use CW Skimmer or any future plans, and maybe just broaden that a bit as far as do you have internet access? Do you tie into any sort of packet networks, or what do you do along that line?
Well, the answer is on Skimmer, no, we have not made any effort to do that. I know NetAA 7A has been looking into it to see if it might be possible. The challenges we face in West Africa is internet access is typically dial-up. So we concentrate on trying to get it set up, use it more the second day of the contest than the first day because it's not always reliable. But we've had pretty success. So we even run our own cable from time to time to tie into the hotel if we had to. Or we've paid for a license or paid some money to have access. But again, it's not high speed. It's all dial-up, so you can imagine what that's like. It does pretty well on packet clusters, but it is prone to being knocked off the air from time to time, and we have to recommit. So depending on who's available at the time, we try to monitor it more the second day than the first, depending on how good our connection is.
Okay, very good. Paul's asking about filtering. I imagine you use bandpass filters. Any sort of stubs or any other additional filtering used with your setup?
Yes, we have typical bandpass filters. Most of them are the ICE filters. We also have some receive filters for the receive ports, and we have built coaxial stub filters off the back of the amplifiers as well. So you've got the 200-watt ICE filters at the back of the radio, and then stub filters off the amplifiers. Some of them are multiband, some are not. But we've been able to have good success with that, and our station-to-station interference has been all but nil, basically none.
Let me just add to that. I mean, typically our setup is 7 stations, 1 per band plus 1 multiplier hunter. So the 6 are almost like single operator, single band stations. So they've got the single band ICE bandpass filters, and then there'll be a multi-band switchable on the multiplier station.
Okay, very good. Gary, K7ZD says, excellent presentation. What kind of panic sets in when the logging network goes down? And maybe if you guys think about it too, you mentioned, I forget what QTH it was where you had the electrical problems, but if you can think of maybe a biggest instance of where things just, something happened, and you really thought you were in trouble, maybe before or during the contest, what your biggest oh shucks moment was.
Most of them really haven't been related to logging at all. We've had good success over the years where we had things out of sync. We used CT for a very long time, and then more recent years we moved to WinTest, and this last year used N1MM. But in the CT days, because it's simple to use, each laptop would have its own log. We'd back that up at the end of the contest, and then have to do a merge. Because none of them were exactly the same. And I mean, that was okay. We had a general idea where we were. And our passing mults, it really was a piece of paper and a pencil, or turn around and tap the guy and say, hey, I'm sending ST2R, if Robert's on, ST2AR over to you to 21025 now. So those type of things. You might be shouting across the hallway. If we had guys in a different room, there was years where we had 2 shacks because we couldn't get a room big enough, then you rely on the network to send spots across for moving guys, because key to anybody's success is moving multipliers. It's a lot easier to do when you're rare than it is to do when I'm sitting in my house in Arizona. But nonetheless, you got to make an effort to do that. So,
yeah, okay. It got a lot easier when we transferred over to a wireless router, because
yes.
We were getting a lot of RFI problems on the network, on the wired network.
Okay, let's see. Let's take 1 or 2 more here, and then we'll go ahead and wrap things up. Wondering how much of your contest success do you attribute to the rarity of the call sign versus the equipment and operating skills?
Well, we all suck as operators, so we can't give any of it to that. But having a rare call, absolutely it makes a difference when you're the only game in town from a particular country. Yeah, absolutely, it helps because you're right. But no matter what, you still got to have some decent CW skills, because I can tell you there's more than 2 or 3 guys calling at a time. Typically, you might have a pileup of 50, 100, 300. I don't know. It gets large to the point where even in a contest we might have to operate split up one just to be able to sort it out, so that you come back to guy, they don't hear you because you're still being covered by the pile. So our skills are okay. I mean, Rogers is terrific, and some of the other guys is terrific. I managed to get by, but having a rare call sign, man, it makes a huge difference. It makes you popular, makes people want to work you. So I attribute a lot of success to that, but also to the success that we make a good effort to have a good signal in the air. We may not run 1,500 watts, but typically running about 1,000 to maybe 1,100 watts out on each band. And we pay attention to try to do it as correctly and as right as possible. But keep in mind, it's a field day style. We get to a country, we got to pull everything apart, put it up in 4 or 5 days, tear it down at the end of the contest, and pack it up for the next year. So there's challenges in that. So it's kind of a combination of things. You got to have some decent skills though, because the pilots are huge, and typically, Roger, I guess we make anywhere from 15 to 17,000 contacts on a contest raw.
Yep.
And probably about a 5% dupe rate on average.
Yep, that's about right. I mean, if you were to ask a question which might be asked, what is the one single biggest reason why you go to all these lengths, it would be to run the pile-ups. I mean, it's like an adrenaline rush to have pretty much non-stop pile-ups the whole time we're there. So to be somewhere rare obviously helps enormously in that respect, and as Mike says, to be the only station on the air in that particular country means, we are the only available station for that multiplier. So everybody comes to us. We don't do much S&P.
Okay, very good. Let's see. Victor, G3JNB is asking any problems with rigs or any equipment for that matter overheating with the high temperatures you have there.
A few over the years. We've had amplifier blow a tube on us, short out. That's happened a couple of times. I remember Fred almost falling out of his chair when that happened to him, and I can't tell you what country it was in, but it was a loud boom. We've had problems with the rigs, but generally not so much breaking down during the contest. It's usually after they've sat for a year We had a situation in Ghana where stuff had gotten stored in an outside shed and leaked, and the stuff that was still in cardboard boxes had a lot of rust on them. And a couple of the guys like G4PIQ, Andy and such got stuff working, Bob G3ZEM. But in the case where a 930 VF, you had to reverse the VFO the other direction to get it to go up in frequency rather than what your normal standard used to. But other than a tube or two blowing up from time to time and me blowing up a laptop once, we've been pretty lucky with the rigs not going down. And we've got a good bunch of guys who can fix things quickly.
The one time we had a directly heat-related problem, I think, Mike, was with a couple of rotators in Ghana. We decided in the end that the extreme heat and humidity was expanding the metal, so the darn things were not turning in the heat of the day. And as the sun set, they started turning again.
Yep. So there's problems like that, but most of them, other than the two spoons for the transmit receive relay for one of the alphas, it was a fix on the fly. Our problems have been, fortunately, pretty minimal.
Okay, last question comes from Mark, AA1AC. Interesting. How do you stay healthy during your trips?
Well, you make sure that you drink bottled water. You make sure you hydrate a lot. Some of the guys who are not used to the heat, especially the dry heat, don't realize how fast you lose moisture. And so we've had a few occasions where there's been some lightheadedness because of the heat. But and I think N7NG stepped on a nail one time, had to get a tetanus shot and a little constipation for one of the members one time. But for the most part, it's if you pay attention to what you're eating, eat at decent restaurants, which we try to do. Avoid certain types of food, which we try to do, and use common sense. You can stay pretty healthy, and use things like sunscreen when you're out in the sun all day long. Make sure you take a good number of breaks to get rest, rehydrate, and to cool off before you go back out. So common sense, practical stuff generally keeps you pretty healthy. And of course, there's always things like malaria pills and other stuff you got to have. You got to have yellow fever and tetanus and polio shots and stuff that you got to do before you go.
Yeah, it's a shame because this part of the world has a terrible reputation, not just for crime and poverty, but for sickness. And we've been going there for what 16, 18 years in a row, and we've never had a serious illness of any sort, apart from the little things that Mike has just mentioned. I think the single biggest risk is as he says, is heat stroke and exhaustion from dehydration. We've had a couple of cases where there's been a degree of heat stroke. Which is corrected by taking on water. So you avoid, you don't have ice in your drinks, and you don't take local salads because they may have been washed in local water. Just very bog standard common sense things, really.
Okay, very good. Well, guys, thank you very much. Appreciate you taking the time to do this presentation for the group. And let me just put one other slide up here. I want to go ahead and make sure everyone's aware of our upcoming events. Simplest is just to keep an eye on www.pvrc, Potomac Valley Radio Club.org, under the upcoming webinars for future events. Next one is September 7th. We got another look at WRTC 2010, and we've got the European guys that are going to be doing that for us, including the winning Russian team will be joining. So I think that'll be a good presentation. And then I think it's the week before the CQ Worldwide RTTY, Ed W0YK, who's the contest director, is going to do a presentation on the contest and talk about some topics to pertain to CQ Worldwide RTTY. So those will be on the PVRC webpage. If you want to register for them, just go there and you can click just as you did for this, and you'll be all set. Guys, again, thanks. I know Mike's always very busy traveling for work, and Roger's jetting back and forth to W7, and so these guys have been very busy with their personal lives, and I appreciate them taking the time out of that to put together the presentation and join us today. So with that, thank you all for attending, and we'll see you next time. Have a great weekend and upcoming week. Take care. So long. Bye-bye.